Hello and welcome to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Here, post regular season, it is Selection Sunday in college football as the college football 2025 bracket has been revealed. We might get into some reaction of the teams that were selected to go to the college football playoff. But for today's show, as signing day just happened, we will be doing some 2026 Texas Longhorns signing class superlatives, including class MVP, who we think are the most underrated players, and things of that nature. And then to end the show, as we're now 1 month into college basketball non-conference play, we will be doing a national check-in. Who are the national title contenders after 1 month of the college basketball season? And who might be knocking on the door of that discussion? We'll get into all that on today's show. But remember, if you like what we do here, or if you just like our content, maybe it's the NFL content that you like, push a couple buttons at the bottom of your screen, especially that subscribe button. Majority of our viewers, I think it's around 75%, are not subscribed to our channel. So it just helps us. We don't fill up your inbox with meaningless newsletters or meaningless information. You really don't even get notified of anything. We're not going to bother you. It just helps the YouTube algorithm. And then if you like the show, or even if you dislike the show, give us some interaction in the comment section. Give us some feedback. We'd really enjoy that. And then Texas fans, I know we've probably been expecting this, but what is your take on Texas staying at number 13 in the college football playoff rankings, ahead of Vanderbilt, but behind BYU and Notre Dame, who gets left out? I know there are a lot of disappointed Notre Dame fans. So, with all that being said, I bring in my co-hosts, Mr. Emmy Nixon. How are you on this fine Sunday?
I am good, man. I'll even start by answering that question from my perspective on how I feel about Texas being left out. I mean, it was expected, of course. So overall, can't complain about. Well, you can obviously, but like the season overall, it was a good year given the roster talent deficiencies at certain spots. I think. I think given all the challenges we had offensively, you look back to October, early October, late September, and you tell us that they go 9-3. I mean, I would take that, and I would probably tell you, hey, like you go 9-3, you have a chance at making the playoff. It didn't end up working in our favor in that sense, but I think it comes down to that Florida loss. We've talked about it ad nauseum on the show, but hey, it's we'll move forward with Arch going into his second year. There's a lot to be positive about in Longhorn Nation.
A busy December upcoming for Steve Sarkisian and this entire coaching staff. Listen, the transfer portal doesn't open up necessarily until January 2nd, so I don't think you'll see any commitments until that January 2nd to January 16th window. But Texas will be scouring and making those phone calls behind the scenes with agents and player representatives to put out feelers. And I can already tell you, with Steve Sarkisian's National Signing Day press conference this past Wednesday, once Texas had officially signed their 2026 recruiting class, he mentioned repeatedly that they were going hard after offensive linemen in the portal. Based on the intel I have, they've already made the bat signal. They've already put out the bat signal. This coaching staff and agents know Texas wants offensive linemen. Players know Texas wants offensive linemen. And that's an attractive place to play. So, and then the other thing that we should mention before we get into this recruiting stuff is, Amy, I don't know if you saw this announcement. The Big Ten did this a year ago. They have expanded now. The SEC has from 85 to 105 scholarships. So that gives Texas some extra room to work with, and they should have some extra spots even without any attrition to this roster before the transfer portal opens. So I think that's a big boost to the Longhorns because now, if they want to, they can put some of their walk-ons on scholarship and still have extra room to take 10 to 15 transfers. Whereas before, you are going to need some attrition to occur, which is going to naturally, to get to the numbers that I think Texas wants to have to be as aggressive as they want in the portal. So over the next month or so, we'll have that intel for you guys. As the Pittsburgh Steelers, is that game? I think that's game. Yep. Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Baltimore Ravens. They now lead the division. Let's get into this recruiting stuff. Did you have any comments on that, or do you just want to jump into our superlatives?
Let's jump into it. This will be the primary tonight, guys. We will we'll have some call at the end if we have time, and I do have some am on a little bit of a time crunch for me personally, but we'll get to it if we have time at the end. But this will be the primary part of the show, so let's hop right into it.
All right. We've split these superlatives into offense and defense. So let's start with class MVP on offense. Emmy, who you got?
The obvious choice is Diabell, but to make it a little bit more interesting, I want to shout out Derek Cooper as well. He's a 4-star running back, and obviously, Jermaine Bitt is an athlete that's going to be. We don't know what his position is going to be yet, and I would love to be able to give you my take on whether he'll end up on offense or defense, but I genuinely have no clue there. So, from Derek Cooper's standpoint, he's a big bruising back, and the running back position is a spot where Texas needed an influx of talent, and that's really what this is. He's 6'1", 205. He has good speed. He's number 10 at his position nationally. So you feel really good about the level of talent that he is. It's just more so, the little things, like whether or not he will get on the field early. It just comes down to the little stuff at the running back position. Are you able to, pass protect? Are you able to run routes and catch the ball? Like the actual, running of the football, I feel like most freshmen are able to do that for the most part. It's the other stuff that will decide whether he'll get on the field early. And I feel pretty good about him being able to do that come late in the season next year and getting in for some spot snaps.
I feel really confident, unless there's some kind of injury, that Derek Cooper will see early playing time next year, like very early in the season. They did the same thing with CJ Baxter when he was a freshman. Texas went to the mattresses from an NIL standpoint to not only gain Derek Cooper's commitment back in the summertime when, like a month before he committed, he didn't even have Texas in his top 5. But once Texas lost a couple important running back recruitments, they went to the absolute mattresses from an NIL standpoint, almost like they did with Chris Henry Jr. this past week, according to what I'm hearing. But that's a different story for another day. They're paying him a lot of NIL money. I'd guess close to $1 million, if not around there, based on what I've heard. I think he's going to see early playing time because I think there's going to be some attrition in this running back room. I'm expecting at least 2 guys probably to transfer out, and then it comes down to like Trey Wisner and what his decision is ultimately going to be, whether he decides I'm going to the NFL, I've kind of maxed out here, or if he doesn't like what he hears from the advisory committee, could he come back? But regardless of whether or not Trey Wisner is back, Derek Cooper might not start right away. He's not going to – I don't think he's going to do what CJ Baxter was ultimately able to do back in 2023. But I think he's going to get some early playing time for sure in this offense. They needed that infusion of talent. And look, it's easy to go with Diabell here. And look, if Diabell is the guy that brings Texas a national championship. I wouldn't be surprised because he's one of the best quarterback prospects in the country. I think you can make an argument that he's a better prospect than his peers, like a Jared Curtis, who flipped from um, Georgia to Vanderbilt this past week on National Signing Day, basically. But he's going to have to come in and beat out a KJ Lacey and likely wait his turn at least another year before he's competing for that starting job. I like KJ Lacey. I haven't really seen him enough. I put my money down probably on Diabell to beat him out in 2027 and become the starter. And if he brings them a national championship, he'll be the MVP of this class because he's the quarterback. But I think start to finish, Derek Cooper's the kind of guy that can be the running back, the next great running back at Texas. And I think start to finish, from a numbers standpoint, I think you'll see him at least next year and beyond. As of right now, I'd slightly go with Derek Cooper.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're on the same kind of wavelength there. Who'd you go with for defensive MVP?
There's two guys here I think you can pick from. Ultimately, I went with Richard Wesley slightly over Tyler Atkinson for a couple reasons. Number one, I think Richie Wesley, as good as he is as a prospect, I think if he be at his peak, he could become a guy just based on his length and his athleticism and his size, could become like a Daniil Hunter type. And that's a guy who's been to, I believe, multiple Pro Bowls at least in the NFL. He's had double-digit sack seasons in the NFL. He kind of reminds me of Daniil Hunter from that standpoint, like a size build standpoint. I think he's going to get his opportunities early, even in an edge room that is super talented. But with Colin Simmons likely leaving, he'll probably be a top 5 pick in the 2027 draft. I think he'll have an opportunity to not only play early next year, but become a starter the very next year. And with Ethan Burke leaving and some of the edge talent that will depart here in the next couple of years, I just think the edge position is a little bit more valuable than the off-ball linebacker position. I really like Tyler Atkinson. If I had to put a bet on who contributes earlier between Tyler Atkinson and Richie Wesley, I'd put it on Tyler Atkinson just because of the void that's going to be left in that linebacker room with Anthony Hill likely departing after the season. But I think Richie Wesley has it all. If it weren't for Diabell, I'd rank him as the number one prospect in this class. He's a unanimous 5-star. Not that Tyler Atkinson isn't, but I just think from that edge position in this defense, with the skill set that he has and how I project Richie Wesley at the next level, I think he could potentially become the next great edge rusher in this, on this Texas Longhorn football team. Not in the same way necessarily that Colin Simmons is. I don't think he's that from like a get-off standpoint and a talent standpoint, but he's as good as it gets. And I think what Texas did in this class is they said, we might not have the deepest class. In fact, we know we don't have the deepest class. It's not as deep as our past couple classes. We're ranked 8th. We finished 8th in the 24/7 team recruiting rankings. But what we do have and what we will say is we'll put our best 5 guys up against anybody else's best 5 guys. And with Richie Wesley, Tyler Atkinson, Diabell, Derek Cooper, and even a guy like James Johnson on the defensive line. And then you get down to like a Jamarian Carlton from a ranking standpoint is your 7th best dude in the recruiting class. That's something else. So I'll go Richie Wesley, but I can understand arguments for Tyler Atkinson or maybe even a guy like Carlton if you project him to be that good.
Yeah. I honestly, I was right there with you. I kind of want to go with somebody else just for the sake of being able to shout out somebody else. So I'm going to shout out Jermaine Bishop also. Um, like I had said before, there's a chance he's playing wide receiver, and this ends up being a completely different conversation. But for the sake of this, assuming he plays corner, I mean, this is the third ranked player in the state of Texas. Like that, he's a small guy. I think he's 160 pounds somewhere in there. So he's not a big guy, but he's extremely athletic, extremely fast, and just he once he gets into a Texas weight and conditioning program, by the time sophomore year comes around, this dude's going to be an impactful player whatever position he's playing at.
Shout out Jermaine Bishop, man. They lost to DeSoto. Willis High School did yesterday in the high school football playoffs. But Jermaine Bishop's high school career has now come to a close, and he ends up as one of the best players to come through the state of Texas in the last quarter century.
Yeah.
So in his high school football career, 5th all-time in receiving yards, 5th all-time in receptions, and 11th all-time in receiving touchdowns. And we're talking about guys like Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba who have played at the highest levels of Texas high school football. And he'll also be, Emmy, the greater Houston area's all-time leader in receiving yards, receptions, and receiving touchdowns. So you can make an argument that he is the best high school football player in the last quarter century to play in the Houston area. I ultimately see him playing more offense early than defense, just because I think I can envision him easier, like getting him the ball in space and letting him make plays with his athleticism and electricity with the ball in his hands at 155, 160 pounds, if that's what he is. Then I think him playing corner at that size early on. But if he ends up a defensive player, I wouldn't be surprised at all. So I don't know which way that's going to end up going, but I can definitely see the argument. So Jermaine Bishop, just from an electricity standpoint, from a league pass standpoint, if you want to watch one player's highlights in this class, you watch his highlights first.
That's the guy. That's the guy. Yeah, 100%. Just a football
and
player.
It feels, I don't know how much we talked about his commitment when he committed back in the early summertime. I think it was June, but that commitment's become bigger and bigger as this season has played out. I think he's a 5-star by at least 24/7. I'm not sure about the others, but he is a bona fide super blue chip. So
yeah,
super excited about him. Let's go most underrated on offense first. And the only guys that you can't choose for this are the two guys we've already talked about. You can't choose Diabell and you can't choose Derek Cooper. But most underrated other than that, who would you pick on offense?
You know what? I'm leaning towards John Turntine, the tackle out of Fort Worth.
Yeah.
He has to bulk up. He's 6'4", 270. He's not, he's going to be up above 300 pounds by the time he, gets on the field, whenever that does come. So there's a long way to go there. But, dude, like the athletic traits from this guy, I mean, you could place him at tight end right now and he'd give you something. Like, that's how good of an athlete this guy is at his size. So, like, when you're talking about recruiting, like you get traits. It's a little bit different than draft, where it's like you want, crazy production and pedigree. Like, not that he wasn't productive, but like there's guys that are then more impactful for their high school teams, but no tackle is more athletic than this dude. Like, you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody.
I think 2 years in a row now, the offensive line recruiting from this program has been majorly disappointing. To me, it's the most disappointing part of any position because I don't think they found. Texas is lucky that they've been able to do what they've done with Trevor Gooseby. Because if not, they don't have a left tackle like in the future. Because I project John Turntine, and I agree with you, by the way. I think you can make an argument for one of the two receivers, Chris Stewart or Cohen Brown. I really like Cohen Brown's tape, the Waxahachie kid. I think if there's like a rash of injuries or he just comes in and kills it, maybe he could be the Grayson Littleton of the offense next year.
I can see it. Yeah.
But I think that all really depends on where they start Jermaine Bishop, because I think Bishop would be ahead of him in the pecking order, but you never know. Turntine, there aren't 5 better football players in the state of Texas than John Turntine. The reason that he's underrated is because earlier back in this recruiting process, earlier in the spring / early summer, at a powerlifting event, he weighed in at 268 pounds. And so his body is just not ready physically from a standpoint to step in right away at Texas, because he's going to have to, I think he's got to get to at least 300 pounds. He's got to pack on the weight, and it's been hard for him to get that weight. Now, he's fine playing at that weight at the high school level because he's just better than a lot of the kids he goes against. And from a technique football playing standpoint, you can't find a better pure offensive lineman from a skill set standpoint. But from a size standpoint and just from a freakish athleticism standpoint, I mean, there are guys out there, specifically the one that we all know Texas missed on, and Felix Ojo. I think that kind of guy projects more as like a future all-pro left tackle more so than Turntine, because I think Turntine's a little smaller. But like from a football playing standpoint, he's a 5-star football player on the football field. Just like the nastiness that he brings. I think it's going to take him at least a year. But the reason he's underrated is because I think people are kind of counting him out because he's kind of small right now for his position, and he needs to put back on the weight. And I think that powerlifting event and him coming in at 268 freaked a lot of people out. But do you remember what we said last year at signing day, or what a lot of people said last year at signing day when Texas ultimately missed on Fasusi? They weren't saying you have to go get Felix Ojo. They were saying you have to go get John Turntine. There was a point in time in this recruiting process where it wasn't must have Felix Ojo. It was must have John Turntine. Because at that point, he was at a more like real playing weight that you could project him more easily stepping in early on this offensive line. I think 2027 is when I think you look for him to step in if he can put on the weight. Texas has done it before, especially with Trevor Gooseby. I project him playing more on the interior, maybe at guard early, and then maybe kicking out the tackle. But yeah, I think Turntine's super underrated just because from a pure football playing standpoint, like he was once the guy in 2026 for Texas, but now he's just kind of a guy in this recruiting class, to be quite honest with
you. Yeah. The name stands out if you've been following this 2026 class for a while, for sure. Like it's a little bit different for if you are just now picking up on this class and you're seeing like he's a 4-star and you're seeing his playing weight, you're like, oh, 270, interesting, right? Like, but you got to remember too, I don't know if this is the case with Turntine, but these are high school kids, so they're playing other sports, they're training for other things. When he gets to Texas and trains only for football, that's going to flip in a hurry. I have no doubt in my mind he's going to put on weight in a hurry. He's going to get to he could probably get to 320. Like, obviously, you got to do it healthily, but I think it's very doable.
Emmy, do you want to, since it's 3:45, do you want to finish the recruiting segment, cut this part 1, and then do part 2 college basketball at some point later on in the week when we can find time? Do you think that's a better plan potentially?
I think so. Yeah.
Let's do that. I'm completely cool with that. I don't want to cut us short on the college basketball conversation. So
Yeah, I agree. Because we're at a point in the season with college basketball guys where like we're getting closer to conference play, so we want to get in this conversation about the tiers. So we're going to be giving our Final Four national championship contender type teams, and then the teams below that will be more so like Final Four, like knocking on the door type of teams. That I wasn't even planning the rhyme there. And then I don't even know if we're doing a tier 3, but that's kind of the conversation we're going to be having. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that'll be out later this week. Let's most underrated defense. I'll go first here. I think there are a couple players you can pick from. You just can't choose the 5 stars, Tyler Atkinson and Richard Wesley. I ultimately went with Kosi Okpala out of Matey Creek down in the Houston area. A 4-star, 24/7 Sports top 100 prospect who plays linebacker technically, but I think he has the versatility to play linebacker or edge. Now, he's going to have to better learn the linebacker position. They utilize him a lot rushing the passer, and he's really effective in that way. A lot of people in the industry envision him growing into more like a hybrid safety / linebacker in the future. Maybe kind of like a Jelani McDonald type, but maybe a little bigger than that. I don't think that's the case here. I think he has the potential to grow more into a Trey Moore, who you can use at off-ball linebacker, but can get after the passer with his skill set. The other guy I considered for this, just because I'm not quite understanding why he's not ranked higher by some of these recruiting services, is Samari Matthews, who I think is a bona fide super blue chip out of North Carolina. One of the best players in this class at defensive back. But ultimately, I decided on Okpala, who I think will be a good player, maybe not in 2026 for Texas, but in 2027. I could see a Ty Anthony Smith trajectory for him, just in kind of a different way. I think he's a really good player. I think he's being overlooked.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to shout out Hayward Howard Jr. He's a 4-star out of New Orleans. So for him, man, he was a reclassify, wasn't he?
No, Richard Wesley.
No?
Richard Wesley was a reclass.
Okay.
He's 16 years old. He's 16
well,
years old, but
well, regardless,
that's a good pick.
Yeah, Hayward Howard, man, he's at 6'2", he's taller than a lot of the corners that Texas has gotten in the last few years. He's a little bit of a different build. Still has the speed and quickness you want, while also being more of a lengthy corner to get after it against some of these bigger wide receivers, man. Obviously, he's probably not ever going to go against Jeremiah Smith because he's only gone to the NFL by the time he's getting significant playing time. But guys like that and that archetype that are extremely physical wide receivers, you want corners that can match that. And this is the guy in this class that I think will be in that role. I also think that finished product wise, his playing weight could be anywhere from 200 to 220 pounds. So I could see this dude being a box safety even, playing kind of the roamer role, the tight end killer role, following the star tight ends, things of that nature. There's a lot of different ways you can use this guy.
He's having a strong finish to his senior season at Edna Carr in the state of Louisiana. That's a powerhouse high school program. And you just hit on the point that I wanted to bring up, which is I think he's got versatility kind of like Okpala does at linebacker, where you can envision him ending up as a safety, but you could also see him playing corner. That commitment, again, kind of like Jermaine Bishop, not to that quite of an extent, but that got overlooked when Texas got that commitment. It's not easy to pull a guy like Hayward Howard Jr., as talented as he is, away from schools like LSU in the state
Yeah.
of Louisiana. But he actually just got his rating bumped up by 24/7 Sports. He was a 3-star. Now he's a 4-star. So that's, make of that what you will. But I can definitely
No.
see him. I think Samari Matthews has the potential to make an earlier impact. I think he's more ready, but I could see all three of those guys being really good players for the Longhorns. All right, let's go. Let's go. Biggest recruiting miss. Is there a big time, like, I don't want to say killer to this class, but thing that you think either a player or a position that you think Texas kind of swung and missed on in this recruiting class?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I don't have a player in mind, but if you look at this class big picture, so one quarterback, two running backs, two receivers, three offensive linemen, one tight end, three defensive linemen, three linebackers, three defensive backs, and then five special teamers. So you probably would have wanted maybe one more receiver or maybe one more offensive lineman. It's hard to, I don't know what their plan is transfer portal wise, so it's hard to, you know, it's hard to know. I think you could probably answer this question, but better than I could, to be honest. I don't really have a player in mind for that.
For me, there are two positions that have been kind of disappointing the last 2-3 years in recruiting, and that's offensive line and tight end. I think the biggest miss for Texas in this particular recruiting class is not getting a guy that ultimately right now projects as an instant impact or could project as an instant impact left tackle. I don't think they have that in this offensive line class. I don't think John Turntine is that right away. I don't think that's it's definitely not Nicholas Robertson, and it's not Caden Scherer, the guy that they
Flipped.
flipped
Yeah.
from the same high school as Jet Walker here in the Austin area. But and look, that guy eventually turned into a good player, but ultimately SMU came in with a bigger NIL offer. Texas wasn't really willing to match it with Max Wright. He kind of would have been the underrated guy that you could maybe project just because of his size at left tackle. Maybe they would pull something off similar to what they did with Trevor Gooseby. Ultimately, those guys played at the same high school, so there was some symmetry you could see there. But SMU flipped him, and then Texas really wasn't able to do anything with Felix Ojo. Credit to Texas Tech on that one. They just went to the mattresses on that one. Texas did not. And then there were a couple other big time left tackle types like a Kinyi Pipi or a Emmanuel Iheanacho, who went both to Oregon and I think USC respectively that Texas could have been in on. I think that's probably the biggest miss because you still don't have your projectable left tackle, I don't think, in this room after Trevor Gooseby. But you could also argue tight end because I like Nick Townsend, and I just don't know what the future holds for Jack injuries. I think those two players will probably be back next year. So you're kind of fine there, but I would have liked Texas to be a little bit more aggressive at both those positions.
Yeah, I agree. I think tight end in particular has been a big um, missed opportunity for Texas. And not so much with Gunnar Helm. He was a very productive guy. But I think you look at Georgia and obviously it's hard to compare to Georgia because they've made a thing out of having these stud tight ends every single year, having two or three of them even. But man, like, is it such a weapon to have a guy that big and that fast to be like just a weapon to put at any given spot? Like you look at how Tyler Warren is used by the Colts. Like he's used as a fullback. He's used like in the backfield all over the place. If Texas had a guy like that Sark could use as a chess piece, like that would be such a luxury that this team has kind of been missing.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this part 1 up with your overall grade for the offensive class and your overall grade for the defensive class. Well, how would you assess that?
Well, offensively, it starts and ends with Diabell because obviously, I think a lot of the recruits Texas got, like you look at how they pair with Diabell because these are the guys that are going to grow together. And obviously Diabell, I see him as being a starter for Texas soon,
Yep.
very soon. So, yeah, I mean, he ended up being what, the number 2 quarterback in this class
Yep.
behind the kid that went to Vanderbilt?
Yep.
Or what did it end up being?
It was number 2 behind
Yeah.
Jared Curtis. That's correct.
Right. And he got hurt. So, you never know what would happen. So yeah, I mean, I can't give it any lower than a B plus, given that you got the number 2 quarterback in the country. But the offensive line part of it is what brings it down.
Yeah. What about the defense? How would you assess that part?
I really liked what we did on defense. In all honesty, I give the defense probably an A minus or an A. I don't know if I were to nitpick anything, maybe it would be grab another D tackle, get some beef inside. But Texas has been doing a great job of finding guys in the portal for that position in particular. So maybe they just look to keep doing that. So, and I can't argue with it as long as it keeps working. So, yeah, I think defensive side of things, Texas has really been cooking these last few years from a defensive recruiting standpoint.
I think you're right on the money. I'd give the defense an A. Maybe you can argue that they needed another safety corner type in this class, but I'm not going to nitpick it like that. I just think when you boil it down, they got instant impact, super blue chip, 5-star talent at every level. And I'd argue they filled their biggest need in this defensive class, which is a replacement for Anthony Hill. And that's how I project Tyler Atkinson. So I'm not going to nitpick it too much. You get James Johnson, who's a super blue chip defensive tackle. And ultimately, like, they don't need the numbers there right now. They're good on numbers at defensive tackle. They might take one in the portal this year, especially if Hero Canoe ends up going to the draft. He's kind of 50-50 right now. I think he's going to stay, but I'm not 100% on that. But like, you have Alex January coming back. You have Murad Watson coming back. You likely have Hero Canoe coming back. You have Justice Terry, who's right there. And so, like, you get James Johnson in here and you have the guys from last year's recruiting class. I think you're good on numbers from that perspective. So you got an elite player there. You get an elite player at edge, maybe 2 elite players at edge with Carlton and Richie Wesley. And I'd argue that's the most important position on the defense. And then you replace Anthony Hill. Maybe Tyler Atkinson isn't Anthony Hill, but he's a great all-around linebacker. We'll see how that ends up. And then, like, you only get really Samari Matthews, but you get an underrated player in Hayward Howard Jr., and then you have Yaheem Riley back there. So it's like they filled pretty much every need that they needed to on defense. I'd give the defense an A. I'm not going to nitpick it too much. Offensively, the thing that holds me back from an A is obviously I think you have 3 excellent playmakers. Like, you got high-level talent in this offensive class with Bishop, Cooper, and Diabell, if Bishop ends up an offensive player. But the offensive line, even though you do get a guy like Turntine, I'm still waiting, like, what is Texas going to do in the future at left tackle beyond next year. And then I won't nitpick the receiver class too much because you do have Bishop there, and last year you signed a big class, and so you don't want to like push those guys out the door quite yet. You don't want to push like a Khalid Lockett or Jamie French out the door quite yet by bringing in another 5-star. So I won't nitpick that part too much. The part I nitpick is tight end and offensive line. But even with that, like you still have Charlie Gillette, who is a big body who could potentially turn into something down the road at tight end. And then you do have Turntine, who I don't think makes a 2026 impact, but probably makes a 2027 impact on the interior. So I'd give the offense a B+. And overall, I'd probably give the class like an A-. It's not last year's class, but it's an excellent class.
Absolutely. Yeah. This team is super young, man. Like it's a smaller class, but it's by design because we have so many really good players coming back. So,
Yeah. So we'll be mentioning players from this 2026 recruiting class over the course of the offseason. We'll probably have some segments that indirectly relate to this class. But this segment right here, this part 1 for this week, kind of officially wraps up and puts a bow tie on the 2026 Texas Longhorns recruiting class, which doesn't finish top 5, but it does finish top 10. We'll be back at some point earlier in this week with our college basketball segment. That's going to be the brute of our college basketball coverage until conference play starts in the new year. Just because we have college football playoff stuff to cover over the next couple of weeks. We've got Texas offseason moves with coaching staff turnover and things of that nature, and the coaching carousel. And then I want to eventually get into some fall baseball stuff, maybe a little bit of that sprinkled in. So we've got to check off the college basketball part of this, but we're on to 2027 in recruiting, and that starts with the transfer portal here that opens up in about a month, a little less than a month. So we'll keep you updated on all that. But for part 1 of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, my name is Michael Ween, and joining me as always was Emmy Nixon. Again, we'll be back later this week with an NFL episode of some sorts, likely talking about the playoffs and our predictions for who ultimately is going to get into the playoffs. Do the results from this week or the past couple weeks change that? We'll talk wild card races. We'll talk division races with the last 4 to 5 weeks coming up here in the NFL. And then we'll obviously have that college basketball conversation. And then next week, we'll do a fun segment. We'll predict the college football playoff. I think that'll be a pretty fun segment.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
But yeah, that's going to do it. This has been Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Hook 'em and peace out.
Peace.